Well, joining us now from Calgary is Zain Velji. He's a senior consultant with Hilton and Knowles.From Strategies. With us from Vancouver is Alise Mills. She's the executive director for Conservative Voice, a not-for-profit that promotes fiscal conservatism within Canadian federal politics. And from Ottawa, we're joined by Lindsay Doyle. She's a consultant with Summa Strategies and a seasoned veteran of Canadian politics. Thanks to all of you for joining us. Zain, let me start with you. Just a few months ago, Justin Trudeau was considered an unlikely candidate for Prime Minister. Too young, too inexperienced. Now he has led his party, the Liberals, to an emphatic victory. What changed?
You know, you're right. He was considered to be a lightweight, someone whose inexperience and age was considered to be the biggest liability of his political future. What changed, frankly, was that we had the longest election in Canadian history in recent memory. 11 weeks may not seem long in the American context, but for us, this was a very long election. And frankly, the biggest thing that changed was the size of the election, the length of the election, and the ballot box question fundamentally changed from the economy to jobs to how much do Canadians want to get rid of Stephen Harper. And the answer to that question was desperately. Justin Trudeau was there at the right place at the right time. Sure, he had built a little bit of a crescendo, but let's not forget, only a month before, Tom Mulcair, the leader of the NDP, was soaring at 40% of the polls, where Trudeau ended last night. So this could have been anyone's game, but frankly, what happened is the ballot box question changed, and Justin Trudeau was there to sweep people in with his positive, palatable messaging and vision for the country.
Elise, let's look at how the Conservatives fared on Monday. Stephen Harper did not just lose, he lost very, very badly. What went so badly for the Conservatives?
Well, they completely deviated off the message and off their strength, which was their record on the economy. You know, Canada is performing, out of all the G7, is the strongest economically out of the G7. Unlike what your reporter was talking about in the early part of the introduction, Canada's not in a recession, and it was a short dip, and we're back on growth. We have a surplus, a balanced budget, and we've been able to accomplish a lot. So on the fiscal conservative side, the Conservative Party's record has been extremely strong. They deviated into social issues that made Canadians think about values, made them, I think, uncomfortable in that discussion. They may share, you know, certain personal thoughts around particular social issues, but they were definitely not comfortable having it used as a wedge issue in the campaign. Quite frankly, it was one of the worst election campaigns that have been run by the Conservatives. It was theirs to lose, and it began, as Zain said, with deciding to go with an 11-week campaign. It was about 7.5 weeks, far too long, and what it did was it played to Justin Trudeau's strengths in regards to you know, being able to get out there and perform with the public, and really he's a very strong retail politician, so this played right into the Liberals' hands. And then, of course, there was the global issue in regards to the Syrian refugee crisis, and Mr. Trudeau was extremely smart in being able to take that story and expand on it and build it into an arc that really asked Canadians where their social values were.
Right. I want to get back to that question that you raised, which was the duration of the campaign and how it helped Justin Trudeau. But I want to go to Lindsay now. If there was another loser on Monday night, it was the New Democratic Party, the NDP. They fared very poorly, losing 50 seats that they had before the elections. Why did voters turn away from the NDP?
I think that, I mean, it was challenging for the NDP. Certainly, they were kind of entering the beginning of a very long campaign as the front runner, which I think was probably new for many in their party. And so they didn't really know how to conduct themselves throughout this campaign. So, you know, when they should have been very present, putting together a lot of very ambitious and bold ideas to sell themselves to Canadians, instead they fared a little bit more, a bit more of a cautious approach, I'll say. And I find that what we saw throughout the campaign with respect to discussing budgets, the economy, defense procurement, it sounded a lot more like they were speaking from the same side as the Conservatives, as opposed to, you know, a party that would traditionally be on the far left of our political spectrum. So I think that really did alienate them a little bit. And when people were looking at that changed narrative, and, you know, my colleagues are right in saying that that's certainly something that became very dominant in this campaign, it actually began to hurt the NDP because more people were going to be looking towards Mr. Trudeau as opposed to Mr. Mulcair as that real change that they could see, to oust Harper and to get a new leadership regime in.
Zain, Conservatives spent a lot of money, millions in fact, on trying to discredit Justin Trudeau.
Yeah.
The message was just not ready, pointing to his youth, his inexperience. Did that backfire? Because Trudeau, he almost appeared to embrace that message, the youth and inexperience. In fact, one of Canada's broadcast organizations, the CBC, pointed out that he handled criticism like that in a very mature way.
He did. Not only did he embrace it, he actually made that line, just not ready, integral to his campaign. He repeated that sentiment with whether it was on ads or saying, if Stephen Harper thinks I'm not ready, well, here's what I'm not ready for: failing our middle class, not, enshrining Canadian values. So he made it very integral to his campaign. When you talk about it backfiring, it certainly did, because what happened is that the ballot box question changed. As soon as Justin Trudeau was viewed as inexperienced or may not have enough sort of political mileage on his tires, that changed very quickly when it became a campaign of who was likable, who actually talked about Canadian values, who was able to be a reflection of the Canadian electorate on large and en masse. And when that happened, Justin Trudeau became the most likely and most viable contender for that race. The one other thing I'd add is that, what else failed Tom Mulcair in this situation, despite his early lead, was his likability, and his character was something he was struggling with throughout the campaign. Tom Mulcair was known as a very fierce, sometimes angry, but very competent legislator. And throughout this campaign, he struggled with that quotient of likability. He really wavered throughout the campaign. And the person who remained even-keeled about that, who a lot of Canadians saw when they saw themselves and saw when they saw the rest of the electorate, was Justin Trudeau. So he really did take that and make some political jiu-jitsu out of it, certainly.
Right. Alise, I'm going to get back to that point that you mentioned earlier on about the campaign and the duration of the campaign, 78 days, 11 weeks. Did that help Justin Trudeau? Was he able to get his message across in all that time that he had? And did Stephen Harper and the Conservatives fail to get their message across? They had the same amount of time.
I think the length of the campaign, quite frankly, was a big part of it, but also it really came down to likability. Zain's absolutely right. Tom Mulcair, obviously I don't share his politics, but I have a tremendous amount of respect for the NDP leader. Both him and Mr. Harper were titans in the House of Commons in their debating. It harkened back to some historical times that we've seen in Canadian politics, and I think it really resonated with political junkies when you watch both of them debate one another. And half the time Justin Trudeau was not in the House of Commons, he was out campaigning or holding events. And what he really understood was that Canadians were looking for likability, and this is one of those campaigns where the person that's won the election probably had one of the lightest campaign platforms. And so the length of the campaign really played to that retail side of politics that I was talking about before. If the Conservatives had really thought about this, these were Justin Trudeau's strengths right from the beginning. He could go the distance. They believed that the longer he was out there, the more that he would create the faux pas along the way, and there would be the tripwires. In fact, he ended up soaring through it and really building momentum off of that passion he has for that retail side, where the Conservatives got off message when global issues, such like I said, as the Syrian crisis came into play, because that really played into the narrative that Mr. Trudeau and the campaign team with the Liberal Party were hoping for. It gave Justin a lot of runway to work with, and so that is really, I think, the failure of the Conservative Party is they've misunderstood their opponent from day one.
Lindsay,
to add to
go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to add to Alise's point there. I absolutely agree. There's generally two ways to run a campaign. One is to develop an arc and have it climax and culminate with a victory at the end, or a strategic proposition for a victory at the end. And the other way is to react to a series of events. And the Conservatives started out with Plan A, which is the plan that generally works, which is they put out their boutique tax credits, they appealed to their base, they talked about their competence on the economy, and it seemed to be working fine. But as soon as the Syrian refugee crisis hit, Stephen Harper really never got back to the economy. He was never able to even shift from the Syrian refugee crisis to the Trans-Pacific Partnership and use that as a win or a checkbox to show his success. So it really became a campaign about social issues and values. And in Canada, a lot of these questions have been answered decades ago about what type of a people we are and who's a Canadian, what does it mean to be a Canadian. Those questions have been answered. And Justin Trudeau was there to double down on the fact that, yes, we are a multicultural nation. And that helped as part of his victory as well.
All right, Lindsay.
Well, and
yes.
Sure.
Sorry.
No, I was just going to say that from a values-based perspective, you know, a lot of things did come up during the campaign that did, you know, take it away from obviously an economy and a security narrative, which I think the Conservatives really wanted to keep consistently, because again, they saw themselves as being stewards of both in Canada. Ever since we had, you know, it's going to be 1 year ago on Thursday, a soldier tragically gunned down here in Ottawa. Obviously, that was something that stuck with a lot of people. The issue of security came up, and certainly various pieces of legislation to follow were something that were going to plague this campaign positively and negatively for all parties. So when, you know, the Syrian refugee crisis became front and center very early on in the campaign, which was something I don't think anyone would have expected at the time, it was the way that the Conservatives and the Prime Minister himself conducted himself, and the way he responded to you know, very disturbing photos of refugees from around the world, and the fact that you know, more news and more information trickled out, that despite the Conservatives making multiple assurances throughout this past year that they had actually allowed more refugees to come in, that was in fact the opposite. And for Canadians, that is an issue that, regardless of political stripe, really irked a lot of people, raised a lot of concern, and raised a lot of questions around the leadership of the Prime Minister and what kind of man or what kind of government he was running at the time. And that again allowed both opposition leaders, so at the time Mr. Trudeau and Mr. Mulcair, to come in and really to hammer at their record. And again, I think from that point forward is when we really did see that values conversation emerge. We saw the issue of niqab come up. We saw the issue of citizenship. And so from then on in, it was going to be very challenging for the Conservatives to bring it back to a narrative that they were going to be strong on.